The conference room door slammed open with such force that everyone inside jumped. Olandria Wright strode in wearing a crimson power suit that commanded attention, her heels clicking against the marble floor like gunshots. She didn't apologize for being late. CEOs never did. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice smooth as silk but sharp as a blade, "I hope you've reviewed the terms. Velvet Vixen doesn't waste time on negotiations that go nowhere." She moved toward the head of the table, her team of 5 attorneys flanking her like an army. The men from Sterling Industries shifted uncomfortably in their seats. All except one. The man at the far end of the table stood slowly, his face draining of color as recognition hit him like a freight train. Camden Sterling, her ex-husband, the man who had destroyed her 5 years ago. Their eyes locked across the polished mahogany table, and for a moment, the entire room seemed to freeze. Olandria felt her chest tighten, but she'd practiced this moment 1,000 times in her mind. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. Not again. "Mr. Sterling," she said coolly, extending her hand across the table. "What a surprise. I wasn't aware Sterling Industries had changed leadership." Camden's hand was warm when it clasped hers, and she hated that she still remembered exactly how it felt. "Ms. Wright," he managed, his voice rough, "the pleasure is mine." She withdrew her hand quickly, as if his touch burned. "Shall we begin? I have another meeting in 90 minutes. As she sat down and opened her leather portfolio, Olandria's mind flashed back to that horrible day 5 years ago. She'd been in their small apartment kitchen, 6 months pregnant, though she hadn't known it yet, making his favorite dinner to celebrate their 2nd anniversary. He'd walked in, shoulders slumped, eyes empty. "Sign them," he'd said, dropping the papers on the kitchen table. Not the dining table, the kitchen table where they'd shared countless breakfasts and dreams. "Sign what?" she'd asked, though her hands were already shaking. "The divorce papers. It's over, Olandria. My family's right. I'm married beneath me. You're holding me back." She'd begged. God, she'd begged. On her knees, tears streaming down her face, she'd pleaded with him to reconsider, to remember their vows, to remember love. He'd looked at her with disgust. "Get up. You're embarrassing yourself." That night, alone in a cheap motel room, she'd discovered she was pregnant, with twins. "Ms. Wright?" Her attorney, Marcus, touched her elbow gently. "They're waiting for your response." Olandria snapped back to the present, her jaw clenched. She glanced at the projection screen showing Sterling Industries' financial reports. They were drowning in debt, struggling to stay afloat after a series of bad investments. They needed Velvet Vixen's partnership like a dying man needed oxygen. "Perfect." "Your proposal is insulting," she said flatly, watching Camden flinch. "You're asking for a 60-40 partnership when you bring almost nothing to the table except a recognizable name that's currently associated with failure." One of Camden's associates started to protest, but Camden held up his hand. "What are your terms?" he asked quietly. Olandria smiled, but there was no warmth in it. 70-30. Velvet Vixen gets majority control of all design decisions, manufacturing, and distribution. Sterling Industries provides the retail infrastructure and European connections. Take it or watch your family's legacy crumble. The room erupted in whispers. Camden's face was unreadable, but she saw his fingers grip the edge of the table until his knuckles turned white. "We'll need time to discuss," Camden said. "You have 48 hours, Olandria replied, standing up. "After that, I'm meeting with Hexagon Corp. They're very interested in what Velvet Vixen has to offer." She gathered her things and headed for the door, her team scrambling to follow. Just as she reached it, Camden's voice stopped her. "Olandria, wait." She turned slowly, one eyebrow raised. "It's Ms. Wright in professional settings, Mr. Sterling." "Can we talk? Privately?" "We just did. You have 48 hours. She walked out without looking back. In the elevator, her assistant Jennifer noticed her hands trembling. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Olandria lied, pressing the button for the ground floor. "Call the car. I need to get home to my boys." The 15-minute drive to her penthouse in downtown Seattle gave her time to compose herself. By the time she walked through her front door, she'd pushed Camden Sterling back into the locked box in her heart where he belonged. "Mommy!" 2 identical 4-year-old boys came running, their faces bright with excitement. Seth reached her first, crashing into her legs with the force of a tiny tornado. Ethan followed more carefully, but his hug was just as tight. "Hey, my loves," she said, kneeling down to kiss their foreheads. "Did you have fun with Miss Rachel today?" "We went to the park," Seth announced, his dark curls bouncing as he jumped. "And Mommy, we saw something really cool." "Oh yeah?" Olandria smiled, genuine warmth flooding through her. These boys were her entire world. Everything she'd built, everything she'd survived was for them. Ethan tugged on her sleeve, his expression more serious than any 4-year-old's should be. "Mommy, we saw a man who looked exactly like Seth. Same eyes, same nose, everything." Olandria's blood ran cold. "What do you mean, baby?" "There was this tall man," Seth continued, completely oblivious to his mother's panic. "He was wearing a fancy suit and talking on his phone. Miss Rachel said I probably just saw someone who reminded me of you because sometimes kids look like their parents. But Mommy, he looked like my twin." Rachel, their nanny, appeared from the kitchen wiping her hands on a towel. She was a sweet woman in her 50s who'd been with them for 2 years. "I'm sorry, Miss Wright. The boys got a bit fixated on a businessman at the park. You know how children are. They see patterns everywhere." "Where exactly was this man?" Olandria asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Near the fountain at Westlake Park," Rachel said. "He was there for maybe 10 minutes, made a phone call, then left. The boys were playing about 30 feet away." Westlake Park, 2 blocks from Sterling Industries headquarters. "It's nothing," Olandria said quickly, standing up. "You boys must have very good imaginations. Now, who wants to help me make dinner?" But as Seth and Ethan raced toward the kitchen, arguing about whether they should have tacos or pasta, Olandria's mind was racing. Camden couldn't know. In 5 years, she'd been so careful. She'd moved across the country, changed her professional name from Olandria Sterling back to Olandria Wright, built her company from the ground up using her maiden name. There were no photos of the boys on her public social media. Her private accounts were locked down tighter than Fort Knox. He couldn't know. That night, after the boys were asleep, Olandria stood in her home office staring at the Seattle skyline. Her reflection in the window showed a woman who'd clawed her way from rock bottom to the top of the fashion industry. Velvet Vixen had started as a small online boutique she'd run from a studio apartment while pregnant. Now, 5 years later, it was valued at $42 million and growing. She'd done it all alone. Through morning sickness and sleepless nights with newborn twins, through maxed-out credit cards and rejected loan applications, through the whispers and judgment of being a single mother in the ruthless world of fashion entrepreneurship. And now, Camden Sterling had walked back into her life, his company drowning while hers soared. The irony was almost poetic. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk, not about business, please. C." Olandria deleted it without responding. She had 47 hours and 30 minutes until their deadline. Until then, Camden Sterling could suffer. The next morning brought chaos. Olandria was in her office at Velvet Vixen headquarters reviewing designs for their spring collection when Marcus burst through her door without knocking. "We have a problem," he said, his usually calm demeanor cracked. "Sterling made a counteroffer." "Already? They have another day." "They're not negotiating the terms. Camden Sterling is requesting a face-to-face meeting with you, alone. He says if you refuse, the deal is off completely." Olandria's jaw tightened. "He doesn't get to make demands." "Actually," Marcus said carefully, sitting down across from her, "he does. His board is split. Half want to accept our terms, half want to pursue the Hexagon offer instead. Camden apparently has the deciding vote, and he's making it conditional on speaking with you, privately. That's extortion. That's business." Marcus leaned forward. "Olandria, I've worked with you for 3 years. I've never asked about your personal life. But it's obvious there's history between you and Sterling. Whatever happened, don't let it cost you this deal. Velvet Vixen needs Sterling's European distribution network if we want to go global by next year." She wanted to scream that she didn't need anything from Camden Sterling, that she'd burned his memory from her life like cancer. But Marcus was right. This merger would catapult Velvet Vixen into the international market years ahead of schedule. "Fine," she said through gritted teeth. "1 meeting, 30 minutes, in a public place." He suggested the restaurant on 5th, the Sapphire Room. "Tonight at 8. Of course he did. The Sapphire Room was where he'd proposed to her 7 years ago, back when she'd believed in fairy tales and forever. That evening, Olandria dressed like she was going to war. A black designer dress that cost more than her entire wardrobe had during their marriage, heels that added 4 inches to her height, hair swept up to expose the diamond earrings she'd bought herself last year, war paint in the form of perfectly applied makeup that made her look untouchable. She arrived at 8:15, making him wait deliberately. Camden was already seated at a corner table, and when he stood at her approach, she noticed the dark circles under his eyes. Good. She hoped he hadn't slept. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. She sat without responding, ordering a glass of wine from the hovering waiter, before turning her cold gaze on Camden. "You have 25 minutes. Olandria, Ms. Wright," he flinched. "Ms. Wright, I don't even know where to begin." "Then let me help you. You sign our terms by tomorrow at 5 p.m., or I walk. That's all the beginning you need." "I saw children's drawings in your portfolio yesterday," Camden said, his voice barely above a whisper. "During the meeting, when you were reviewing documents, a paper fell out. 2 stick figures labeled Seth and Ethan, with a woman in the middle labeled Mommy." Olandria's heart stopped, but her face remained impassive. "I fail to see how my personal life concerns you." "Do I have children?" The question came out raw, desperate. "You gave up the right to ask me questions about my life when you threw me away like garbage 5 years ago." Her voice was ice, but inside, panic clawed at her chest. Camden's hands were shaking. I was at Westlake Park yesterday. I saw 2 little boys playing. One of them looked exactly like my brother did at that age. Dark curls, green eyes, that same smile. Lots of children have dark hair and green eyes." "Olandria, please." His voice broke. "I know I don't deserve answers. I know what I did to you was unforgivable. But if there's even a chance that I have sons—" "You have nothing," she hissed, leaning forward. "You made that choice. You looked at me 6 months into our marriage and decided I wasn't worth fighting for. You listened to your poisonous family tell you I was beneath you, that I was holding you back from your precious business success. You handed me divorce papers and walked away without a backwards glance." "I was drowning." Camden's voice rose, then he caught himself, glancing around at nearby tables. More quietly, he continued, "My father had just died. The company was hemorrhaging money. My mother and brother were in my ear every single day telling me I'd made a mistake, that I'd married too young, that you were a distraction I couldn't afford. So you chose them over me. I chose wrong." The anguish in his voice was real, but Olandria had built walls too high to let it reach her. "Every single day for 5 years, I've regretted what I did. I destroyed the only real thing in my life because I was a coward who couldn't stand up to my family. And now you want absolution?" Olandria laughed bitterly. "You want me to tell you it's okay, that I forgive you, that we can all move forward? No, you don't get that luxury. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking if I'm a father." The waiter returned with her wine, and Olandria took a long sip, using the moment to steady herself. When she spoke again, her voice was deadly calm. "Even if you were, what makes you think you deserve to know them? You couldn't commit to a marriage. You couldn't stand by your wife when things got hard. What makes you think you'd be any good at being a father?" Camden looked like she'd physically struck him. "You're right, I wouldn't. But I'd try. God, Olandria, I'd try so hard." "Their names are Seth and Ethan," she said, watching his face go pale. "They're 4 years old. Seth is bold and fearless and never stops talking. Ethan is thoughtful and gentle and notices everything. They're brilliant and beautiful and perfect, and they are mine. I carried them alone. I birthed them alone. I've raised them alone through every sleepless night, every fever, every milestone. You don't get to walk in now and play daddy because you're feeling guilty." Tears were streaming down Camden's face, and she felt a savage satisfaction at his pain. "I have twins," he whispered. "I have sons." "No," Olandria corrected, standing up. "I have sons. You have a business decision to make. Sign the papers by 5 p.m. tomorrow, or this conversation was pointless." She walked out of the restaurant with her head high, leaving him broken at the table. But the moment she got into her car, her composure shattered. She gripped the steering wheel and let out a sob that had been building for 5 years. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She'd planned everything so carefully. The revenge merger that would give her control over his family's company. The moment she'd reveal how successful she'd become without him. The satisfaction of watching him realize what he'd lost. She hadn't planned on him finding out about the boys. She definitely hadn't planned on the way her traitorous heart had twisted when she saw genuine devastation on his face. When she got home, Rachel was waiting in the living room. "The boys are asleep," she said gently. "Rough meeting?" "You could say that." Olandria kicked off her heels and padded to the boys' bedroom. She needed to see them, to remember why she'd built these walls in the first place. Seth and Ethan were tangled together in Seth's bed, which happened most nights even though they each had their own. They couldn't stand to be apart. In sleep their faces were angelic, peaceful. She'd done everything right by them. They were happy, adjusted, loved beyond measure. She wouldn't let Camden disrupt that. The next day, at 4:55 p.m., Marcus appeared at her office door with a triumphant smile. They signed, every term exactly as written. "Congratulations, Ms. Wright. You just became the majority shareholder in Sterling Industries." Olandria should have felt victorious. Instead, she felt hollow. "Schedule the press conference for next week. I want maximum media coverage." "Already done. This is going to be huge. The fashion world is going to lose their minds when they find out Velvet Vixen absorbed Sterling." Absorbed, conquered, destroyed, all the words she'd wanted to use against Camden Sterling. So why did victory taste like ash? That evening, as she was leaving the office, she found Camden waiting by her car in the parking garage. Her security team tensed, but she waved them back. "You're becoming a stalker now," she asked coldly. "I signed your papers," he said. "Everything you wanted. The deal goes through. You get control. My family loses their majority stake in the company my grandfather built. You win." "I know, but I need you to understand something." He stepped closer, and she noticed how exhausted he looked. How broken. "I'm not walking away from my sons. I don't care about the company anymore. I don't care about my pride or my family's opinion or anything except the fact that I have 2 boys who don't know I exist. And whose fault is that? Mine. It's all mine." Camden's voice cracked. "I own every mistake, every cowardly choice, every moment I wasn't there. But Olandria, they're my children too. Biologically, legally, they're mine. And I'm going to fight for the right to know them." "You wouldn't dare take me to court," Olandria said, but fear crept into her voice. "I don't want to. God, that's the last thing I want. But I will if you force my hand." He ran his fingers through his hair, a gesture she remembered from their marriage when he was stressed. "I'm not trying to take them from you. I know you're an incredible mother. I know you've given them everything I should have been there to provide. I just want a chance to be their father. You can't just show up and expect them to accept you." "I know that. I'm not expecting anything except a chance to prove myself to them or to you." His green eyes, so like Seth's, were pleading. "Please, I'm begging you. Let me meet them properly. Let me try." Olandria wanted to say no. Every fiber of her being screamed to protect her sons from this man who'd abandoned her, but a small, traitorous voice in her head whispered that Seth and Ethan deserved to know their father, that maybe, just maybe, she was letting her own pain cloud what was best for them. "I need time," she finally said. "This isn't just about you and me anymore. They're real people with real feelings, and I won't have them hurt because you're feeling guilty. Take all the time you need. I'll wait. I've already wasted 5 years. I can be patient now." She got into her car without responding, but as she drove away, she saw him in her rearview mirror, standing alone in the garage, looking like a man who'd just been given a death sentence and a reprieve at the same time. Over the next week, the business merger dominated every major fashion publication. "Velvet Vixen swallows Sterling Industries whole," read one headline. "From rags to riches, how Olandria Wright became the fashion world's newest power player," declared another. Olandria did 17 interviews, attended 4 galas, and smiled for so many cameras her face hurt. But every night she came home to her boys and wrestled with the impossible decision Camden had forced upon her. Seth and Ethan were starting to ask questions. They'd seen her on television, seen the newspapers with photos of her standing next to Camden at the merger announcement press conference. "Mommy, is that the man from the park?" Ethan asked one evening, pointing at a business magazine on the coffee table. "Why is he always with you in pictures?" Seth added. "Is he your friend?" "He's a business associate," Olandria said carefully. "Someone Mommy works with." "But he looks like us," Seth insisted. "Miss Rachel said people who look alike are sometimes related. Is he our uncle or something?" The innocent question hit her like a sledgehammer. She'd always planned to tell them about their father someday, when they were older. When she'd figured out how to explain abandonment and divorce to children who'd never known anything but unconditional love. She just hadn't expected someday to arrive when they were 4 years old. "Boys, come sit with me," she said, patting the couch beside her. They scrambled up, one on each side, their small bodies warm against hers. "I need to tell you something important." "Are we in trouble?" Ethan asked worriedly. He was always the one who feared consequences. "No, baby, nothing like that." She took a deep breath. "You know how some of your friends at preschool have mommies and daddies who live together? And some have just mommies or just daddies," Seth added helpfully. "Like Tommy has 2 mommies and no daddy, and Sarah has a daddy and a stepmom." "Exactly. Well, you boys have a daddy. He just doesn't live with us." The silence that followed was deafening. Then Seth asked, "Why not? How did you explain adult failures to children? How did you tell them that their father had chosen his pride over their existence?" "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes," she said slowly. "Your daddy and I got married when we were very young. We loved each other, but we had problems we couldn't fix. We decided it was better to live separately." "But where is he?" Ethan asked. Why have we never met him?" "That's complicated, sweetheart. Your daddy didn't know about you until very recently." Seth's face scrunched up in confusion. "How could he not know? Didn't you tell him?" "When Mommy and your daddy separated, I didn't know I was pregnant yet. By the time I found out about you two, we weren't talking anymore." It was a simplified version of the truth, but it would have to do. "So, he didn't leave because of us?" Ethan asked, and the relief in his voice broke Olandria's heart. Had he been carrying that fear, wondering if he and Seth were somehow unwanted? "No, baby, never. Your daddy didn't know you existed, but now he does, and he wants to meet you." "The man from the park?" Seth's eyes went wide. "The one who looks like me?" "Yes, his name is Camden, and he's your father." The boys looked at each other, having one of those silent twin conversations that didn't require words. Finally, Seth turned back to her. "Do you want us to meet him?" The question gutted her. These 4-year-old boys were trying to read her feelings, trying to figure out what would make her happy. They shouldn't have to carry that burden. "I want you to do what feels right for you," she said carefully. "This is your choice. If you want to meet him, we can arrange that. If you need more time to think about it, that's okay too." "What if we don't like him?" Ethan asked. "Then you never have to see him again, I promise." "What if we do like him?" Seth countered. That was the question that terrified her most. "Then we'll figure it out together." That night, after the boys went to bed, Olandria found herself dialing Camden's number. He answered on the first ring, as if he'd been waiting by the phone. "I told them," she said without preamble. "They know you're their father. They want to meet you." She heard what sounded like a sob on the other end of the line. "Thank you. God, Olandria, thank you." "Don't thank me yet. There are going to be rules, strict ones. You follow them, or you never see them again. Understood?" "Anything. Whatever you need." Saturday afternoon, 2 p.m., the Children's Museum on 3rd Avenue. You'll have 2 hours with them, supervised. I'll be there the entire time. You don't mention the past. You don't make promises you can't keep. And if they seem uncomfortable or ask to leave, we leave immediately. "Okay, yes, I'll be there." "Camden." Her voice softened slightly. "They're just kids. They don't understand adult complications. Don't put your guilt on them. Don't try to buy their affection with gifts. Just be honest and be present." "I will. I swear I will." Saturday arrived too quickly. Olandria dressed the boys in their favorite outfits, Seth in a blue shirt with dinosaurs, Ethan in a green one with planets. They were bouncing with nervous energy, asking questions non-stop during the car ride. "What if he doesn't like us?" Ethan worried. "Impossible," Olandria assured him. You two are the most likable people on the planet. What if we don't know what to say? Seth asked. Then you don't have to say anything. Just be yourselves. Camden was already waiting outside the museum when they arrived, pacing like a caged animal. When he saw them approaching, he froze. Olandria watched his face as he took in his sons for the first time up close. The wonder, the fear, the overwhelming love that seemed to crash over him like a wave. Boys, Olandria said gently, this is Camden. Camden, these are Seth and Ethan. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Seth, always the braver one, stepped forward. Hi, I'm Seth. I'm 4 years old. I like dinosaurs and building blocks and macaroni and cheese. Camden dropped to his knees, bringing himself to their eye level. Hi, Seth. I like all those things too. His voice was thick with emotion. Ethan stayed closer to Olandria, studying Camden carefully. You do look like us, he said finally. Especially Seth. You have the same eyebrows. Camden laughed, and it sounded like relief and joy and heartbreak all mixed together. I guess I do. And you know what? You have your mom's smile. Both of you. That beautiful, bright smile. They spent the next 2 hours exploring the museum. Camden followed the boys from exhibit to exhibit, listening intently to their chatter, answering their endless questions, helping them with interactive displays. Olandria watched from a slight distance, her heart in her throat. She saw Camden crouch down to tie Ethan's shoelace without being asked, saw him lift Seth up so he could see into a tall display case, saw him laugh at their jokes, even the ones that didn't make sense, saw him taking mental photographs with his eyes, as if trying to memorize every moment. At one point, Seth grabbed Camden's hand naturally, pulling him toward the dinosaur exhibit. Camden looked down at that small hand in his, and Olandria saw tears streaming down his face, even as he smiled. When their 2 hours were up, both boys groaned in disappointment. Already, Seth complained, but we haven't seen the space exhibit yet. We can come back another time, Olandria said. Can Camden come too? Ethan asked, then looked shyly at his father. If you want to, I mean. I would love that, Camden said hoarsely, more than anything. As they walked to the parking lot, Seth chattered non-stop about everything they'd seen. But Ethan hung back with Camden, his small voice serious. Are you going to stay? He asked. Or are you going to leave again? Camden stopped walking, kneeling down to meet Ethan's eyes. I'm going to stay. I promise. I know you don't have any reason to trust me yet, but I'm going to prove it to you. Every single day, I'm going to show up. Mommy says promises are serious. She's right, they are. And I'm making you the most serious promise of my life. Ethan studied him for a long moment, then nodded solemnly. Okay, but if you break your promise, I'm going to be really mad. That's fair, Camden said, his voice breaking. I'd be mad at me too. In the car on the way home, the boys were unusually quiet. Finally, Seth said, Mommy, I liked him. Is that okay? Olandria's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Of course it's okay, baby. I want you to like him. Do you like him? Ethan asked perceptively. That was a question she couldn't answer honestly. Did she like the man who'd abandoned her? No. Did she hate seeing him bond with their sons? She should, but the truth was more complicated. Watching Camden with Seth and Ethan had cracked something open inside her chest that she'd thought was sealed forever. It's complicated, she settled on. Your daddy and I have a lot of history, but that doesn't matter. What matters is that you two are happy. Over the next month, Camden became a regular presence in their lives. He showed up every Saturday without fail, sometimes taking the boys to the park, sometimes just coming to their home to play board games or build elaborate block towers. He never missed a scheduled visit, never canceled, never made excuses. Olandria watched, waiting for him to fail, waiting for the other shoe to drop. But it didn't. He learned their routines, their likes and dislikes, their fears and dreams. He knew that Seth needed exactly 3 bedtime stories, and Ethan needed his blue blanket to sleep. He knew that they both hated peas, but would eat broccoli if it was covered in cheese. He knew that Seth was terrified of thunderstorms, and Ethan had nightmares about getting lost. And slowly, impossibly, Seth and Ethan fell in love with their father. Camden taught me how to ride a bike without training wheels. Seth announced one evening at dinner, his face glowing with pride. He helped me with my numbers, Ethan added. I can count to 100 now. Olandria smiled and made appropriate proud sounds, but inside, jealousy and resentment warred with something that felt dangerously like hope. She'd been their only parent for 4 years, their only everything. Now Camden was swooping in and becoming the fun dad, while she was still the one who enforced bedtime and vegetables. It wasn't fair, but life had never been fair. The business merger was proceeding smoothly, which meant Olandria and Camden had to work together regularly. It was torture being in conference rooms with him, maintaining professional distance while knowing he'd spent the previous Saturday teaching their sons to throw a baseball. One evening, after a particularly long board meeting, Camden stopped her in the hallway. Can we talk? Really talk? We talk all the time about profit margins and distribution strategies. You know what I mean? He looked around at the empty executive floor. About us, about what we're doing here. There is no us, Camden. There's you, there's me, and there are our sons. That's it. Is it? He stepped closer, and she caught the familiar scent of his cologne, the same one he'd worn during their marriage. Because I see the way you look at me sometimes when I'm with the boys, like you're remembering something. I'm remembering how you destroyed me, she shot back. I'm remembering how I cried myself to sleep every night for 6 months after you left. How I was so depressed during my pregnancy that my doctor put me on bed rest because my blood pressure was dangerously high from stress. How I gave birth alone because I had no family, and you'd made sure all our mutual friends picked your side. So yes, I remember. I remember everything. Camden's face had gone pale. You were on bed rest? Something could have happened to you, to the babies. But it didn't, because I fought. I survived, without you. She grabbed her briefcase. The boys can have their father. That's their right. But you and me, we're business partners and co-parents, nothing more. She walked away before he could see the tears threatening to fall, but Camden wasn't giving up. He started showing up at moments that had nothing to do with scheduled visitation. When Seth got sick with the flu, Camden appeared at their door with soup and medicine, staying up half the night to help monitor his fever. When Ethan won his first Little League game, Camden was in the stands cheering louder than anyone. He was proving himself. Day by day, hour by hour, he was showing her that he'd changed, and it terrified her. 2 months after their first meeting, Camden asked if he could take the boys overnight. Olandria's immediate instinct was to say no, but Seth and Ethan were practically vibrating with excitement at the idea of a boys' sleepover at Camden's apartment. Please, Mommy, Seth begged. Camden has a really cool place with a view of the water, and he promised to make us pancakes for breakfast. I don't know. We'll be careful, Ethan promised, and we'll call you before bed. She looked at Camden, who was watching her with understanding in his eyes. He knew what he was asking. Her first night away from her boys ever. Nothing spicy for dinner, she said, relenting. Seth's stomach is sensitive. Ethan needs his blue blanket or he won't sleep. They share a room. Don't try to separate them. Bedtime is 8:30 and they need to brush their teeth for 2 full minutes. Seth will try to skip the back molars. Don't let him. Got it, Camden said, pulling out his phone to make notes. And Camden? She grabbed his arm as he was leaving with the boys. If anything happens, anything at all, I'll call you immediately. Promise. That night, alone in her penthouse for the first time in 4 years, Olandria wandered from room to room like a ghost. The silence was deafening. She kept checking her phone, waiting for Camden to call and say there was a problem. The call came at 8:45. Mommy, Seth's voice filled her with relief. We're in our pajamas and Camden made us hot chocolate. Not too much sugar, I hope, she said. Just a little, Ethan's voice came through. And we brushed our teeth. Both of us. Camden checked. We miss you, Seth said. But we're having fun. Camden's apartment has a telescope and we saw the moon. That sounds amazing, baby. Do you miss us? Ethan asked. So much my heart hurts, but I'm glad you're having fun. After they hung up, Olandria sat in Seth's room, surrounded by his stuffed animals and dinosaur posters, and let herself cry. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming realization that her life was changing whether she was ready or not. The next morning, Camden brought the boys home, and they exploded through the door with stories about pancakes and cartoons and how Camden had let them build a fort in the living room. "Did you behave?" she asked. "Mostly," Seth admitted. "I tried to stay up past bedtime, but Camden said you told him I'd try that, so he was ready." After the boys ran off to play, Camden lingered at the door. "They were perfect. Thank you for trusting me with them. I didn't have much choice. They're your sons, too." "Olandria." He said her name like a prayer. "I know you don't want to hear this, but I need to say it. I was wrong. 5 years ago, I was the biggest fool alive. I let my family's toxic expectations and my own cowardice destroy the best thing that ever happened to me. I threw away a woman who loved me unconditionally because I was too weak to stand up to my mother and brother. Why are you telling me this? Because I've spent 2 months with our sons and I see you in everything they do. Seth has your determination. Ethan has your kindness. They're generous and smart and funny because you raised them that way. You did that alone. You built an incredible life and an incredible company and raised incredible children, all while I was being miserable and pretending my family's approval would fill the hole you left." "Is there a point to this?" she asked, but her voice lacked its usual edge. "The point is that I'm in love with you, still, always. I never stopped." He held up a hand when she started to protest. "I'm not asking you to feel the same way. I'm not asking for anything except the chance to prove that I'm not that scared boy anymore. I'm a man who knows what matters: family, love, being there when it counts. Let me prove it to you." "Camden, I'm not going anywhere. No matter how long it takes, no matter how many walls you build, I'll wait, because you're worth waiting for. You always were." Before she could respond, he left, leaving her standing in this doorway with her heart pounding and her carefully constructed defenses crumbling. That night, lying in bed, Olandria admitted something she'd been avoiding for months. She still had feelings for Camden. Buried under years of hurt and anger, the love hadn't died. It had just been waiting, dormant, for the right moment to bloom again. But loving him and trusting him were two different things. The breakthrough came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Olandria was in her office when her assistant rushed in. "Ms. Wright, there's been an accident. The school called. Seth fell on the playground. They're taking him to Children's Hospital." Olandria's blood turned to ice. She grabbed her keys and ran, calling Camden from the car. He answered immediately. "Seth's hurt, Children's Hospital. I'm on my way there now." "I'll meet you there." She made it to the hospital in record time, running through the emergency room doors to find Camden already there, pacing in the waiting area. Their eyes met, and for a moment, all the walls between them vanished. They were just two terrified parents. "Any news?" she asked. "Not yet. Where's Ethan?" "Still at school. I called Rachel to pick him up." Her voice broke. "They said he hit his head." "What if—" Camden pulled her into his arms and she didn't resist. She couldn't. She needed his strength right now because hers was failing. "He's going to be okay," Camden murmured into her hair. "He's strong, like his mother." They stood like that, clinging to each other, until a doctor appeared. "Mr. and Mrs. Sterling?" "We're not," Olandria started, but Camden squeezed her hand. "We're Seth's parents," he said firmly. "Seth has a mild concussion and a sprained wrist. He's going to be fine, but we want to keep him overnight for observation." The relief was so intense that Olandria's knees buckled. Camden caught her, holding her steady. They were allowed to see Seth, who looked tiny in the hospital bed, his left wrist wrapped in a bandage. "Mommy, Daddy," he said, then winced at his own volume. "My head hurts." "I know, baby," Olandria said, taking his good hand, "but you're going to be okay." "I was trying to do the monkey bars like Daddy showed me," Seth said apologetically, "but I fell." "Accidents happen," Camden said, his voice thick. "The important thing is that you're okay." That night, while Seth slept, Olandria and Camden sat in uncomfortable hospital chairs, keeping vigil. At 3 a.m, exhausted and emotionally raw, Olandria finally spoke. "I'm scared," she admitted quietly. "Of what?" "Of this. Of you. Of letting you back in and having you leave again. I barely survived it the first time. I don't think I could survive it twice." Camden turned to face her fully. "Then don't let me back in completely. Not yet. Give me a chance to earn it. Let me prove that I've changed, that I'll never walk away again, no matter how hard things get. How do I know you mean it? How do I know this isn't just guilt or some midlife crisis? Because, he said simply, you're my forever. You always were. I was just too stupid to realize that the woman I married was worth more than any business deal or family approval. You're the strongest person I know. You built an empire from nothing. You raised our sons to be kind and brave. You turned your pain into power, and I love you. Not who you were when we were married. I love who you are now. Olandria felt tears sliding down her cheeks. I don't know if I can trust that. Then don't. Not yet. Just give me the chance to show you. Over the next 3 months, Camden kept showing up, not just for the boys, but for her. When Velvet Vixen launched their international line, he was in the front row at the fashion show, cheering louder than anyone. When she had a brutal 14-hour workday, he brought dinner to her office. When her car broke down at midnight, he was there in 20 minutes with jumper cables and no judgment. He was patient, he was present, he was everything he hadn't been 5 years ago. And slowly, impossibly, Olandria found herself falling in love with him again. Not the young man who'd broken her heart, but the man he'd become. The father who read bedtime stories with different voices for each character. The partner who celebrated her successes without jealousy. The man who looked at her like she hung the moon. On a Saturday in late autumn, after a day at the pumpkin patch with the boys, they were all back at Olandria's penthouse. Seth and Ethan had fallen asleep on the couch, exhausted from running through corn mazes and picking the perfect pumpkins. Camden carried Seth to his room, while Olandria took Ethan. After tucking them in, they stood in the hallway between the boys' rooms, and Camden said, I know you need more time. I know I haven't fully earned your trust yet, but I need you to know that this— He gestured at the apartment, at their sleeping sons, at her. This is everything I want. For the rest of my life. Just this. Olandria looked at him, really looked at him. She saw the love in his eyes, the sincerity, the determination. She saw the man who'd shown up every single day for 3 months, who'd proven through actions, not words, that he'd changed. I'm terrified, she whispered. So am I. But maybe we can be terrified together. She stepped closer to him, her heart pounding. If we do this, if I let you back in, you don't get to leave when things get hard. You don't get to choose your family's approval over us. You're all in or not at all. I'm all in, I promise. Promises are serious, she said, echoing Ethan's words from months ago. I know. And I've never meant anything more seriously in my life. Olandria reached up and touched his face, feeling the scratch of his 5 o'clock shadow under her palm. Then prove it. Every single day. Show me that we're worth fighting for. I will, he promised. For the rest of my life, I will. He leaned down, slowly, giving her time to pull away. But she didn't. She met him halfway, and when their lips touched, it felt like coming home, like finding something precious she'd thought was lost forever. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, Camden rested his forehead against hers. I love you. I never stopped loving you. I know, she whispered. I never stopped either. I just stopped believing in happy endings. Then let me give you one. Let me give us one. 6 months later, on a spring morning filled with sunshine, Olandria and Camden stood in her living room while Seth and Ethan played with blocks at their feet. They weren't married, not yet. There was still healing to do, trust to rebuild, wounds that needed more time. But they were together. A family. Finally, after years of pain and separation, they were together. Mommy, Seth said, looking up from his block tower. Are you and Daddy going to get married again? Olandria and Camden exchanged a glance. Maybe someday, she said carefully, if your daddy keeps his promises. He will, Ethan said confidently. He always does now. Camden dropped to his knees, pulling both boys into a hug. That's right. I'll never break a promise to you or your mom again. Olandria watched them, her 3 boys, and felt something she hadn't felt in 5 years. Hope. Real, genuine hope for the future. It wouldn't be perfect. They'd have arguments and setbacks and moments of doubt, but they'd face them together. And that made all the difference. I love you, Camden said, looking up at her over their sons' heads. All 3 of you, my whole world. We love you too, Seth announced. Right, Mommy? Olandria smiled, feeling tears of joy instead of pain for once. Yes, we love you too. And as Seth and Ethan went back to their blocks, chattering happily about nothing and everything, Olandria let Camden pull her into his arms. She rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat, and let herself believe in happy endings again. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying the person who hurt you. Sometimes it's healing together and building something even stronger than what was broken. Sometimes it's giving love a second chance and discovering that the best parts of your story haven't been written yet. And as Camden pressed a kiss to the top of her head and their sons laughed at their collapsing block tower, Olandria knew that this, messy and imperfect and beautiful, was exactly where she was meant to be. If you enjoyed this story of heartbreak, healing, and second chances, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and drop a comment telling us what you thought about Olandria and Camden's journey. Should she have forgiven him? Would you have given him a second chance? We'd love to hear your thoughts, and don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss our next emotional story. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the greatest love stories are the ones that find their way back home.